there are two operators. You've got ScotRail, and you've also got the Caledonian Sleeper, modelled here in Rail Alphabet 2, but holding on to the Caledonian Sleeper ident, which this is one of my favourite fake idents that I created when I did this thread a while back. I love that. I think it looks awesome. So make that happen. If the Sleeper is going to remain separately identified, which kind of makes sense, it's a long distance thing. It's not quite what ScotRail does. Anyway, and obviously there are other long distance operators that TransPennine Express, Avanti West Coast, and LNER, and also this new one, whatever the new one's going to be called, they all operate into across the border into Scotland as well. But by and large, it's ScotRail for the most part, and then Caledonian Sleeper really is a kind of a Scottish franchise. So there we are. Nice excuse for some mocked up idents. And here's the map ish. I mean, there is a very dense. It's very dense in the middle of the. Well, this is quite weird that it shows the Bowness and Kinneil Railway and the Keith and Dufton. Is this? I couldn't find in the TFW, Transport for Wales have their own version of this. I couldn't find a Scottish version, which to me is an indicator that Scotland's still quite far behind when it comes to properly integrated thing. I think an enthusiast has mocked this up, but it kind of gives you an idea of the rough shape, and there's reasonably good coverage with some gaps that we'll get to and we'll explore when we pick up the data. But there's the map. And right, so as last time, we'll very, very briefly look at the economics and demography of Scotland. So, firstly, Scotland, a lot bigger than Wales and Northern Ireland. So 5.5 million people, but that population is actually one that's decreasing. Are there lots of gnats? Are there lots of Scot gnats in here? Who are going to shout at me when I get things wrong? I'm Scottish, by the way. I was born in Edinburgh in Simpsons and grew up in Inverurie. So. Stuff you all if you're getting angry at me if I get things wrong. Although, interestingly, I've kind of swung from being kind of fairly pro-union to, at best, can be described as union agnostic at this point. I think, and just every time anyone who's really vigorously pro-union says anything, it just pushes me further in the other direction at the moment. Anyway, I digress. Central Belt, actually, I should say 2.4, because the number is now, it's actually 2.4. There's a pretty broad definition of the Central Belt, the Scottish Central Belt, which I'll describe in a sec when I put the map back up. But to kind of give you an idea, the Scottish Central Belt is the only part of the UK that operates as an urban hub outside of London. There's only one part of the UK that does that, and it's Scotland, and it's the Scottish Central Belt. The reason for that is, I'd argue that the reason for that is, Andy Bell wants me to say Crean Larich. Why is that? Crean Larich is very nice, yeah. The Scottish Central Belt, why does it work so well? Well, my thesis, if you like, is the fact that it's got just a huge number of fantastic transport links. So you can live anywhere between and beyond the centres of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and the connections are fantastic by rail. Just really fantastic. People who do that trip might not agree, and yes, the season ticket is very expensive. But it's because capacity is limited; they can charge what they like, and capacity has leapt upwards greatly as a result of the new 375s, the new ones, the new Hitachi ones. They're brilliant. They're really good trains. I was born in Nicky McLeod's asking. I was born in Simpsons. What year? What month? February 91. I was snowed in. Yeah. I'm only little. Anyway, so compare that to the West Midlands, 3 million and 2.8 million Greater Manchester. The Scottish Central Belt is an incredibly There is managed to squeeze some moorland in between Glasgow and Edinburgh. There are some. You could stand in some of the areas just even a couple hundred meters away from the M8, and you'd be forgiven for thinking you're in the middle of nowhere. But actually, it is a hub. It is an urban hub. The connection between the two is very quick. It is an urban hub, and so it's the largest outside of London, really in the UK. If you're going to look at it like that, there are arguments, ways and means about what exactly that looks like. But anyway, so population size, Scotland is a big old lump, and it's a very heavily urbanised lump. So the point is, so here's the Scottish Central Belt. Where are we? Yeah, there's the Scottish Central Belt. If you can visualise, there's Scotland, right? And I do actually need my whacker. Where is it? Come here, Wackham. I need to scribble on things. So, here we are. Let me just click Control P. The Scottish Central Belt is, well, it depends on your definition. There are a couple of definitions. Interestingly, Alistair Ray on the Twitter has posted about this. Alistair, if you're watching, hi. Interestingly, he posted about the Scottish Central Belt was being discussed, and Alistair posted about it, and I'm going to use his image in a second without crediting him. I'm doing it by audio form. Alistair, thank you. So there's Glasgow, and there's Edinburgh. And the two of them are actually, you can see there's not a huge amount between them, but actually quite well. This whole area, and right up to kind of Stirling as well. This whole area is actually, and down and then up the Clyde as well, and right the way along. All of this is heavily populated, and if I flick back, you'll see kind of a slightly better picture there. You can see all these towns, kind of fairly sizable towns. This one though, this is Alistair Ray's image. This is just looking at the M8 corridor. So looking at the M8 from Port Glasgow and Greenock over to where it terminates on the A720 at the big roundabout next to where that Krispy Kreme donut place opened, and everyone went absolutely raging when it appeared, and we're queuing for miles when it. Anyway, that was a bit of a bizarre episode. Anyway, so you can see the M8. There's the M8 whizzing along, doing its thing, and essentially, I think, was it 10 kilometers either side of it? Alistair, what did you do? I can't remember. Anyway, basically, you can see it's about a nominal kind of bubble all around. And that captures, I think, 2.7 million people. And then if you kind of expand it up, include the top of Falkirk, and then get Stirling and all the areas around there, kind of that those parts, get them bring them in, and these, and by the time you've and kind of this stuff here as well. By the time you've done that, and then also you can potentially expand it to include the kind of the urbanized bits of Fife as well. By the time you've done that, you're accounting for between 50 and like 80% of the Scottish population. So actually, Scotland is very heavily urbanised with lots of rural bits. And it doesn't stop there, because there are other urbanised bits as well, which we'll touch on momentarily.